Okay, before I forget, if you want to do anything where you're going to want 6 digits behind your dot, I mean behind your decimal place, remember you go to second button, then format, and mine's already got 6 up there, but for instance, if I wanted to change it to 5, 5, and then enter, now it's 5. Go back to 6, hit 6, and then enter, so now it's back to 6, and then just clear after that. So then I got six decimal places. Okay, so this is the Business 436 cap table exercise. I don't know if you did this in class or this is the new one, but anyway, let's just go through this. It says you founded a company a year ago and things are going well, but you need to raise venture capital to take it to the next level. You own all the company now in the form of a corporation where you own 100% of the stock. You have an offer from Cool Ventures to invest in your company under the following terms. Investment amount $2 million at $1 per share. So that means you're going to have, or they're going to have 2 million shares, right? Pre-money valuation. So remember, pre-money valuation when they're going to invest money in the business, you establish a post-money valuation, which is adding the pre-money plus the money invested. So the post-money is going to be worth 5 million, right? The pre-money is what your remaining share of the business will be worth once they invest the $2 million. So pre-money valuation, $3 million. So at $1 a share, it'd be the same share price. So there's going to be 3 million shares left for you and whoever else of the original owners. Okay, it says stock option pool to be created of 10% of the company's shares ownership before the investor puts in their money. Hint, what pool of ownership does this 10% come from? Remember, they have not put in their money yet, so there's no share price, there's nothing at that point. So it's coming out of your ownership of the company. And the reason they do that is that because that dilutes your ownership from 100% to 90% right off the bat. If they put in their money, then you and that person, the investor of money, own 100%. That goes down to 90%. So you're down to 90% of what you had when they invested the money. Take, for instance, say you did it afterwards, and this was 20 and 2 million shares and 3 million shares. That would be 100% afterwards. Now you both lose 10%. So they're down to 1,000,008 shares, and you're down to 2,700,000 shares. So if you do it afterwards, it dilutes them as well as you. If you do it beforehand, like we're going to do now, it dilutes you. That's why they want you to do it after they invest their money. They don't want their investment to automatically be diluted, which makes it their money is worth less. They went from 2 million shares at $1 a share to 1,000,008 shares. So they lost 200,000 by that dilution right off the bat. That's why they want you to dilute your ownership before they invest the money. Okay, so create a cap table that shows the company after the investment has been made. It says, what is the post-money valuation? Well, we just talked about it. Pre-money, what your part of the company is worth, it's 3 million, plus they're investing 2 million. So 5 million post-money valuation, right? Remember to answer all these questions. Just don't do the table and forget to answer the questions. It says, how many shares do you now own after the Series A? Well, we'll have to do the table for that. How many shares does Cool VC own? We'll go through that, but remember, their shares will not dilute because they are going to put $2 million at $1 per share after you have given 10% to the options pool. So their shares will be the same. So we can just say right now that they're going to have 2 million shares. That's Series A. That's when they put their money in. Round 1, Series A, it doesn't matter. Round 2 or Series B, it doesn't really matter. Okay? So pre-investment. Remember, pre-investment, there are no shares really. So that's why there's X's through here, because there's no one's bought anything, so there's no real share. You own 100% of the company. But now they're saying that they want you to give 10% to that options pool, which means it comes out of your 100%. So you own 90%, and the option pool owns 10%. And remember, Cool VC doesn't invest into the Series A's. So then what they're saying is, you knew that your pre-money valuation was $3 million, so let's just work with what we got, and they were buying in at $1 a share. So that means yours is going to be $1 a share also, right? Because they're all at the same price at that point. Okay, so everything's $1 a share, $1 a share, $1 a share. It's going to be $1 a share here. So if it's $1 a share and your pre-money valuation was $3 million, so 3 million shares, but now you only own 90% of that, you own 2,700,000 shares. At $1 a share, $2,700,000. Percent owned, we'll do that in a second. You can do percent owned two ways, either what your percent of dollars owned, because it's just share price times the shares, or the percent of shares you own. Okay, so now, what was their 10% that they owned? Well, you know, it was $3 million at $1 a share, 3 million before the investment, or they made the investment. You had 3 million shares, so 10% is 300,000. At $1 a share, it's worth 300,000. And of course, this is $2 million. 2 million shares at $1. And these should add up to the 5 million, which was the post-money valuation, right? And you know it's $1 a share, so this should be 5 million shares, which it is. Make sure you fill in all these. Okay, so what percent is owned? Well, you know that you can either do it the worth of your shares divided by the total worth of the company, or the number of your shares divided by the total number of shares. Either way, it's going to get you the same percentage. So if you divide, I like using the shares. So 2,700,000 shares divided by 5 million is 54%. Okay, so when it's asking you, remember to always go back and answer the questions. How many shares do you now own after Series A? You own, well, we could have written that down before, 2,700,000 shares. How many shares does Cool VC own? Well, we know that Cool VC was going to get 2 million shares, right? $2 million at $1 a share. They did not change. You got diluted from 3 million to 200,000 when you gave up 10%. They did not get diluted because that dilution happened back here before they invested their money. So let's go back to finishing the percentages. 2 million shares over 5 million is 40%. And 300,000 shares divided by 5 million shares is 6%. These add up to 100%. Okay, the next page. I pre-populated these Series A's as copied from the table before. Okay, so now they give us another investor. So I just filled all these in. These just came from that table we just did. Rich VC was not investing at this time. They talk about him now. He didn't invest in Series A. He will be in Series B. Okay, so now another investor, Rich VC, wants to invest in the Series B round, or round 2, however you want to say it. Usually they use A, B, and C and all that stuff for this company. She is willing to invest $4 million at $4 per share. Okay, so how many shares is that? Well, let's just figure that out right now. It's going to be 1 million shares, right? $4 million at $4 a share is 1 million shares. So let's write that in. 1 at $4 a share. And we know that once they buy in at $4 a share, everybody's is $4 a share, right? So let's fill that out. Okay. Let's keep reading. At $4 million at $4 a share with a pre-money valuation of $10 million. They give you that number. I don't think you really need it to figure anything out on this, but they tell you that anyway. It says Cool VC decides. Now Cool VC has already invested 2 million shares and 40%. Cool VC decides based on their rights as an investor to invest more money at the same terms as Rich VC, such that they do not suffer any dilution after Series B is finished. In other words, they own the same amount, the same share. They use the word share, not shares. The same percentage of the company, it should say, of the company after this round. Okay, so they want to own 40%. There's a million more shares in, so somehow they got to make up to get to that. They got to own enough percent so they own 40% over here. All these guys got diluted because Rich VC just bought a certain percentage of the company, which they really don't tell you how much they bought. Okay, they tell you how much it's worth. They don't tell you what percent they bought, but we'll figure that out. So you're looking at this, goes, well, how do I figure things out? Well, let's remember what we know. Remember, we're trying to solve for how many shares Cool VC is going to have to buy at $4 a share so that they come out as a 40% owner. Okay? Because they come out as a 40% owner. So you don't change. You're still going to have 2,700,000 shares. Although with him buying another million shares and Cool VC is going to buy some shares, you're going to get diluted from 54%. Okay, but we know at $4 a share, that's going to be $10.8 million. Okay, that's how many dollars worth you have. We can't figure out the percent yet. Okay, Cool VC is what we're going to solve for. Now the option, guys, this is one where you got to think, okay, what do I have? Okay, and what do I need to figure out? The only percentage they tell you is 40%. This has to end up 40%, right? Because he wants to stay at the same. So what number of shares that he has to own to be at 40%? The option guys are still going to own 300,000 shares also. So that you know that the owner, you are going to stay at 2,700,000. They know the option is going to stay the same. Rich VC is buying 1 million shares, right? Because it's $4 million at $4 a share. So that's 1 million shares. And you know that this guy is going to be 40% Cool VC. So now you got to figure this out. And you're thinking, well, they didn't tell you. You could use that other dilution formula, which I'll show you in a later video, if they told you what percent this is. That's with the retention factor and percent of ownership type of thing. But they didn't give you that. But look at this. Just think about this real quick. This is 1.2 million, right? You can multiply the 300,000. Just remember, if they're telling you that he needs to own 40%, then these shares are going to be 60%, right? So if you know these shares are going to be 60% of the total, add them up, 2,700,000 plus 300,000 is 3 million. That's 4 million. 4 million is 60%, right? Because he's going to be 40%. These are 60%. So 4 million divided by 0.6. And what does that equal? 6,666,667 shares. Okay, so now you know that these add up to 4 million. You know this is 6 million, this number, 6,666,000. You know that this is the difference. 2,666,667 times $4 a share. Now you have basically all your numbers together. You know this guy's 40%, you got to add these up, or you can multiply this across. This is 26,666,667. That's what these should add up to. Now you can figure out the percentage, either 2,700,000 shares divided by that, or $10,800,000 divided by that. You can either go by dollars owned or shares owned, but you'll get the same percentages. So this is 40.5%, which is 10,008,000 divided by 26.6, or it's 2,700,000 shares divided by 6,666,000. And then you go through and you know this one's 40%. 1 million divided by that 666 number is 15%. Same as if you did 4 million divided by that number, it's 15%. 300,000 divided by that, or 1,200,000 divided by that is 4.5%. He had his rounded on his table, but that's what they equal to. Now remember, you've got to figure out or answer the last questions too. Exit question: if the company now sells for 35 million, okay, with no further investments, what is the cash on cash return for a Cool VC? Okay, so Remember, Cool VC made two investments. They made a $2 million investment, $200,000 share, 2 million shares at $1. So they paid $2 million, right? And what did they buy? Well, they had this 2 million shares, but they bought 667,000 shares times $4 a share. Because remember, they have to pay, when they're buying these, they have to pay at the new rate. And that is another $2,666,667. So total investment for Cool VC is $4,666,667. Oh, I'm sorry. It says, what did they get out of the sale? This was actually answering that question. What did they get out of the sale? Just take their ownership. They own 40%, right? My mistake. 40% times 35 million. I'll just answer this up here. 35 million times 0.4 equals $14 million. Because, right, their ownership's 40%, and it sold for 35 million. They want to know total amount invested. Okay, so remember, you made two buys, and that's what we just went over. 2 million shares at $1 a share up here. And he already had the 2 million shares, so you don't count that part of it, right? But this is the part he bought to keep it 40%. So he's 40% in both, but he got diluted with the 2 million shares, so he had to buy an additional 666,000 shares at $4 a share. So that cost him this amount. You add those two together, that's the total amount he's got invested. So cash on cash, what they want to know is, and it tells you down at the bottom here, what's his cash on cash? And cash on cash return is simply computed in these types of transactions by dividing the total cash they got out, which is the 14 million, by the total cash they put in, which is the 4,666,000. And if you divide 14 million by that, you get $3 for every $1 cash on cash. Okay, and I'll go through and so remember to always fill these tables out. I'm going to go through and show you the other way of doing this if you knew this was 15%, because he might give that to you. You know about dilution, and if they dilute you up front, but they could also, going back to this, they could have done the dilution earlier on. Excuse me, they could have done it after the purchase, and that would have changed these things. This is on the prior page. It would have diluted everybody, or you and Cool VC, and so you would have owned less percent, and they would have owned less percent. They would have owned, they would own 10%, and then you guys would, you would own 90% of that. He'd own 36%, and you'd own whatever 90% of that is, and they would own 10%. Turns out they only own 6% because he bought in that 2 million shares after the dilution already happened back here. All right, so that's the answer to that one. That's the second.